Welcome to Community Cop. My name is Julian Harper, one of the co-founder members of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. Today I'm here with my two co-hosts. First of all, Noel Leader.
Hotel family.
Second of all, Michael Graves, aka Big Mike.
Namaste.
And as you guys know, we always have our in-house historian give us some information on the historical events that happened in our community. Michael, I know Kwame Nkrumah's birthday was 9/21/09. That was his date of birth.
Yes, certainly we would be remiss in all of our responsibilities if we were to forget the great Asajifu, Kwame Nkrumah, the leader of Ghana that brought Ghana to its independence, the first nation in Africa under colonialization that brought independence to its country. Certainly a fantastic leader of the highest order. He was the world's leading Pan-Africanist day. He invited all African Americans to come back home. And I can tell you out of Ghana, the moment you touch down and the brothers and sisters say Akwaba, you know you at home, and after a while, you really feel you at home, more at home than you ever felt here in America. This great leader was able to bring freedom. Unfortunately, it was a CIA coup years later that removed him from power, but long live the spirit of Kwame Nkrumah, him and his colleagues, Sickle Terrain, and so many others that looked at the progress of African Americans, came here, went to college here, learned, became a good friend, a great friend of Dr. John Henry Clark, and Dr. John Henry Clark talks about that. Certainly Kwame Nkrumah, one of the great African leaders of all time, and much respect and long live the spirit of Kwame Nkrumah, the great Asajifu.
And it's very important and significant that Michael said, long live the spirit of Brother Kwame Nkrumah, because today in 2020, the youth in Ghana have once again resurrected this notion of Pan-Africanism. Of course, the government of Ghana has welcomed African Americans to come back home. We can become citizens of Ghana. We can have dual citizenships. And this is something that many African Americans have to consider. America is not our only option. Planet Earth is 196,940,000 square miles. That vast, vast land mass and water mass, we have options. So some of us, and you'd be surprised, a lot of African Americans who have made their Ghana their new home. But kudos to Brother Kwame Nkrumah and the philosophy of Pan-Africanism, and the country of Ghana, which is now opening itself up to Africans throughout the diaspora to consider Ghana their home and their country.
All right. Michael, also the birthday of George Jackson was 9/23/1914.
George Jackson was a brother, as I said several weeks ago during the when we were talking about the riots. This brother was such a great example that he became famous while he was in prison. He went to prison and ended up doing a life sentence before the authorities killed him for allegedly robbing a gas station of a few dollars, maybe $60 or $70. But this brother found himself in jail, became a dynamic leader in his own right, similar to Malcolm X, read everything available, studied, and as I said before, Huey P. Newton, who was a legal scholar in his own right, said that George Jackson was the greatest writer of us all. George Jackson was just so profound, and everybody read Soledad prison letters of George Jackson, and you will get an education just by reading the letters that he wrote to family and friends, comrades. You just see the deep insight of what the African mind can do unfettered the growth and development that will develop behind the walls. So big ups, and long live the spirit of George Jackson, the spirit of resistance that Henry Highland Garnett has told us to have, that spirit of resistance.
Right, true. And another book is very good by George Jackson's Blood in My Eye. Michael, big up for remembering George Jackson, who was a young man, very influential in his day, very knowledgeable in his day, and represented the best of us and the best of our young people. He was murdered, of course, by the state at that time.
All right. Also, Michael, the Atlanta.
That was good, Noel. That was good.
Michael, the Atlanta race riots?
The Atlanta race riots we're talking about in 1906. This occurred due to the upsurge of Black business, of blacks coming out of slavery, sending their children to college back, pursuing well-to-do jobs. The numbers kept growing. Atlanta was somewhat of a magnet in the South for Black, industrious, young go-getters. Consequently, the whites in Georgia and Atlanta specifically was felt challenged because of the upsurge of professionals in Atlanta at that time, as they are now. And so white mobs, after newspaper articles about blacks assaulting white women, Black men assaulting white women, which was an outright lie, caused white men to take it to the streets, and mobs of hundreds and thousands of whites took to the streets, and they killed every Black person they could find. They destroyed businesses, they burned up houses, they did everything one could imagine. And so when they say things like New York was the first city ever, American city ever under attack, oh, they're way off. Atlanta attacked by its white mobs all over the place, and it took approximately 3 days before the governor called in the National Guard. So it was a bloodbath, and the newspaper, if you read now, it would tell you somewhere between 25 to 100 Blacks might have been killed. They said the number is unknown, but they know it was well into the high hundreds of thousands that were killed, period.
Okay. Also, during this date, Thurgood Marshall was sworn into the Circuit Court of Appeals in 1961 by Kennedy. So there's, a multitude of things, but there's one person that I have to talk about whose birthday was September 24th, 1936. A true hero of mine, and without him I wouldn't be here, is my father, Julian H. Harper. So, I'll be celebrating his birthday on the 24th, which is tomorrow. And, God bless your spirit, Dad. I miss you. So there's no way that I can talk about any time or anyone during these times without mentioning my father, again, Julian H. Harper, who was born on September 24th.
Yes, and I might add that Mr. Julian Harper was a great man. He was a pleasant man. He was one of the biggest fans of Community Cop. He was very proud of his son, Julian Harper. And I've always enjoyed being in his presence, as well as his beautiful wife and Harper's moms. And I'll never forget Mr. Harper. I used to call him Mr. Harper. He was always a pleasant guy, man. He was a really nice guy. So kudos to him. And he was so proud of Julian, so proud of his son. He enjoyed Community Cop. And bar none, he was our biggest fan. Happy birthday tomorrow to ancestor, now ancestor.
Certainly, I concur. Happy Earth Day to Julian's father. No one was a bigger fan of the Community Cop show. He was able to point out to me things that I said, and he said he loved it. So that's a good thing. Put a smile on my face. to tell me some things that I said on Community Cop that he remembered all too well. So big ups on his Earth Day, because that's the way you remember the ancestors. They never go as long as you continue to say their name. So it was apropos, Julian, that you said his name.
Yes, sir. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And you know, my father always wore a 100 Blacks jacket. You know, he had a jacket with his name on it. So, you know, he loved the organization. He loved Community Cop. And, you know, I'm so fortunate to have him have been my dad. So,
and he was proud of his son, boy. He was proud of his son.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So now we're going to go to our first topic. It will be known by the time this show airs that the verdict had come out on the BREONNA TAYLOR verdict on the grand jury. I'll let you start with the Noel, and then, you know, Mike and I'll comment. So go ahead.
Well, the district attorney gave his explanation of the reason why he chose to prosecute one officer and not prosecute two others who were involved in the killing of Sister BREONNA TAYLOR. As those of you who watched Community Cop last week, we stated that we thought it was inappropriate for the family's attorney, Crump, to settle a civil case with the state for $12 million prior to hearing if there was going to be a criminal prosecution. Well, our suspicions are so far proven to be correct. One of the things that this district attorney didn't state, and he glossed over, anybody who's seen his presentation, which was thorough and long, will note that he didn't mention the problem that we discussed last week. He said nothing about the warrant application. Those of us who are investigators know when you conduct an investigation, be it criminal or civil, you start at the beginning. The beginning of this incident didn't occur when the officers were at Sister BREONNA TAYLOR's front door. It began when the officer applied for a no-knock search warrant on her apartment. And what we discovered and what has been stated is that the postal inspector, according to the officer's application, informed the officers that the postal office had delivered drugs to Sister BREONNA TAYLOR's apartment in the past. So the officer put that on his application to the judge and got the no-knock warrant, when we later find out that the mail inspector stated he didn't tell the officer that. In fact, he told the officer that, according to his record, they have never delivered drugs to that apartment. So we have a potential conflict. And Julian, we know the fruit of a poisonous tree, you know, a lot of times forces authorities to throw out all evidence and all convictions when you start off wrong. You can't start off wrong and wind up right. So when the prosecutor gave his dissertation, gave his explanation of the grand jury's decision, he glossed over the whole subject of a warrant. He said that the warrant was going to be investigated by other authorities. What also he stated, and he glossed over it, was he said there was no video footage of this particular incident. We know there was two officers who arrived at the scene: Anthony Jones, who had a camera, a body camera on his uniform, and Officer Coverup, who had the canvas of the body camera. But the prosecutor never stated what his investigation regarding these officers with the possibility of having cameras. He just said that there was no footage. You know, he didn't say whether or not he asked local authorities, were any of the officers on the scene of this particular incident required to wear a body camera. He didn't state, you know, as it relates to Officer Anthony Jones, was his camera on? He didn't state whether he asked Officer Coverup, what happened to your camera? We seen the mount on your uniform. So none of that was discussed. And these are two significant points in this particular incident that was just glossed over. He talked about a whole lot of stuff, a whole lot of other things, but he missed those two very important points. And when we spoke about last week about the family's attorney, Crump, settling a civil case so quickly, and as opposed to waiting and see if there's going to be a criminal investigation and whether or not these points were going to be discussed, we thought that he should have held up. And so far, it seems that we were correct, because in this first presentation by the prosecutor, those 2 points was really just mentioned in seconds and never discussed thoroughly, as he did a whole lot of other points, but they're very important to what actually happened in this particular case. And we can get in later about, he hangs his hat that one person agreed with the officers that they announced their presence. The police, where 12 other neighbors said they never heard the officers say anything, including the brother who was in her apartment who fired his weapon. He said he never heard the officers announce their presence. He can be heard over 911 radio call, asking who's at his door and the officer's not responding. So there's a whole lot that this prosecutor didn't say. He said a lot, but it seems as if a whole lot of important things he intentionally left out of his dissertation or his explanation when he made his presentation, which is problematic.
Mike?
Yeah, I would say that certainly he left out more than he included, and that's Attorney General Daniel Cameron. They picked the perfect gatekeeper to manage this case and bring it to their logical conclusion.
That's right.
Certainly, we know from the courts, the history of jurisprudence in America, that a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich, which was quoted, he knows. He ran the Bronx. He ran the criminal court of the Bronx. Now, what he did was he took advantage that the majority of the journalists and the people watching the live broadcast were laymen. So myself as a layman, but I understood things that he clearly left out, as did Noel, based on what Noel heard. He heard also more things left out than included. Now, he pointed out, well, first of all, he didn't mention why BREONNA Taylor, it took the her medical attention took over 20 minutes for anything to happen. That's too long, especially 1:30 in the morning if a shooting occurs. It's not like medical emergency service technicians have a hard, difficult task to get into a location, not at 1:30 in the morning. Now, when you consider that he was asked, who shot the fatal shots? He said there was no conclusion with respect to how many shots were fired, which is a lie, and there's no conclusion with respect to who shot the fatal shot. Now, except under extreme circumstances where it hit hard tissue, there's no way that they can identify what rounds came from what gun. Consequently, he lied about that. Now, we had heard all along that there was 5 rounds in her body. Today, we hear there was 6. Now, they didn't know why she being shot while she was laying on the floor. They even asked the Attorney General what was the makeup and composition of his investigators. He had the temerity to say, I'm a black man, so I'm representing the team. Well, suppose the team is all white guys with the exception of himself. Is he representing all of them? He as a black man can't tell all black people, I'm a black man, so I'm representing the team. That's not gonna fly, especially one who spoke at the Republican convention. So I would just say that it's too many unexplained things that happened that day. Now they're saying, because Noel pointed out the fallacies in the so-called no-knock warrant, well, now they're saying they didn't serve a no-knock warrant. They didn't go in under the auspices of a no-knock warrant. Well, if not, why did you have a ramrod there, the ramrod the door? Why did you force entry if you wasn't utilizing a no-knock warrant? What was the intelligence involved in knowing who was in the apartment? Who were you actually looking for? Did she pose such a threat? The district attorney didn't, the attorney general, pardon me, did not point out that there was no drugs and no money found in the house. Now, why was all of this around 1:30 in the morning happening? When they went to arrest John Gotti, when they went to arrest Al Capone, there was a courtesy call. There was a knock on the door, and they spoke to the attorneys who said, can you please have Al Capone step out of the house, please? He's under arrest. Can you please have Mr. John Gotti step out? He's under arrest. Courtesy call was made in advance, and they came and got him. Breonna Taylor is more dangerous than John Gotti and Al Capone. This makes absolutely no sense. So I'm saying that he left out so much. It just shows you the lengths that a gatekeeper for the system will go through and the hypocrisy. Now, we mentioned last week that the situation was backwards. You should not have gone in and accepted a settlement before the decision. That's backwards. Establish at least the criminal charges. I'm not telling you to wait till after the criminal prosecution is over, but at least wait till criminal charges are manifested, and then you can go from there. To take the $12 million and for Ben Crump to get $4 million of that, of course he's gonna rush in and get that settled quickly. And now this is what you get. You are muffled and hand strapped. You can't talk about the specifics of the case because that's all part of the settlement. Now, no police officers are going to be criminally charged directly for what happened to Breonna Taylor. They're going to be charged for what happened in another area. In other words, the round that went through that window and sliding door that went into another apartment, that's the basis of the criminal charges. It has nothing to do now with Breonna Taylor, which shows you the hypocrisy of jurisprudence in Louisville at this time.
Well, one of the problems, Michael, is this investigation has to be a thorough and complete investigation. This is what this prosecutor stated, that they conducted a thorough and complete investigation. But as he described his investigation, he left out the beginning of the investigation, as Noel talked about. When we talked about fruit from the poisonous tree. If the beginning of the investigation is what was the impetus of this thing, where it went wrong, let's talk about that. How did we get from point A to point Z where the problem had occurred? If there were problems with the initial aspect of the investigation, and I'm talking about criminal problems, I'm talking about perjury, I'm talking about misinformation submitted to the courts, which is perjury as well. The judge should have had a problem with that. I know if I was the judge who had signed that order and I found out the information that was given me was erroneous, were intentional lies given to me and fed to me by the police, then I want someone held accountable and criminally accountable. And all of these things in its totality is what caused the death of Breonna Taylor. So when they pick apart this particular investigation and they give us the aspect of a shooting that occurred outside of the death of Breonna Taylor, theoretically, and that's what they're going to charge someone with, what about the investigation that caused her, the incident that caused her death? The part of the investigation, which was the beginning of the investigation, where we talked about obtaining a search warrant erroneously, lying to the judge, lying to the courts, fraudulently signing, and I'm sure you have to sign your complaint and your affidavits in this particular case. So all these things are criminal aspects of this investigation, of this case, and no one has been held accountable at this juncture. Now, I know that the prosecutor said that he's not handling that aspect of the case. That does not make legal sense to me. I don't understand how that is part of his investigation, but he's not handling it. So, I mean, we have to really thoroughly look at the investigation, how it was presented, how it was conducted, and the information that's being disseminated to the community by the prosecutor.
And Julian, in his stating, in his glossing over that his office didn't delve into the area of the warrant, he never explained why. He just said it. You know, we're not looking into that. That's being handled by another jurisdiction. He never explained why his office chose or decided not. Maybe if there's some legal barometer that forbids him from getting involved, I don't know. I've never heard of that. But truly, if the officer lied on his application to the judge as it relates to the warrant, there's some culpability on his part. And if the other officers who they said entered the apartment, who weren't the ones who applied for the warrant, if they had knowledge that he lied on the warrant, then there's some culpability on their part. Now, of course, you know, if he decides to absolve the police officers because they were fired upon first, he alleges that her boyfriend said he fired first and they returned fire. If he wanted to absolve them for that, then many people will understand that. But what's important and what has to be determined was, did the officers have the right to and I heard they did have a no-walk warrant. Did they have a right to enter an apartment? And that's a very important. Did they have the legal authority? Did they grant the legal authority to enter in her apartment legally? Was the application what we're saying? Was it a legal application to the judge? So if there wasn't, then that officer who applied for the warrant is culpable, I believe, for everything that occurred. Even if you want to absolve the actual officers, that particular officer who perjured himself and lied to the judge in order to receive that warrant, I think he's criminally culpable for everything that occurred. And you know, he may be able to be charged with homicide. So that's why, Julian and Mike, that is so important, and that can't be just passed over. But what also we need to know is that, you know, the subject of the officers actually present at the apartment was a Jamarcus Glover, who was picked up already. And those of us who have went on warrants, we know prior to doing the warrant, you do a database check to see if the individual is in custody prior to doing the warrant. Now, I'm not sure if they did it in Louisiana, but I know in New York, prior to doing the warrant, whether it's the day before or the morning of, you do a quick check to make certain that the individual is not picked up. Now, he was picked up. So the question has to be asked, and I don't know the answer to the question, was he picked up by the same jurisdiction, by the same police department, or was it another one? Was he picked up days before the application to the judge, or was it that morning? We don't know. It wasn't discussed in this particular dissertation by the prosecutor. And that should be mentioned because everyone knows by now that it was a big mistake, that what happened, well, some classifies as a mistake. I classify it as a crime. You know, these classifications of mistake is no longer acceptable. These officers are supposed to be professional. They're supposed to do their due diligence. What we know is that the individual they're looking for didn't live there, and he was already in police custody when they implemented this particular no-knock warrant. Also, they said the officers even claimed that they thought she was by herself. Now, if she wasn't the subject of the warrant, and they probably did some background surfing to know that she was a nurse, and that if she wasn't the subject of the warrant, they even said she was a soft target. The question has to be asked, why did they come so aggressively with so much ammunition, and why didn't they do, according to Michael, have a more cautious but passive response to her apartment? She was the target. They said that they thought she was home alone, and she was a soft target, meaning that she wasn't a hardened criminal. She's not a big. So there's so many things that went wrong with this particular case. But I want to point out, as we did last week, Julian, that the whole issue of that warrant has to be discussed because it's, you know, even if he wanted to resolve the officers that were present, that officer, if he did lie as it relates to the application, he's criminally responsible, and this prosecutor should have some interest in that. If the officer did lie, because he ultimately caused the following responses that we're talking about today and that everyone's angry about.
Well, this is the question that I have. First of all, I would love to see the warrant, because based on the information they're given, the way the explanations are going, this is based on information I'm receiving through the media, is it an arrest warrant or is it a search warrant? If you're looking to arrest somebody and you're saying, listen, that person may not be there, then if he's not there, then there's no reason to have an arrest warrant specifically for him. Now, if it's a search warrant and they're searching for drugs that may have been in the apartment, my question is, if you're saying drugs were delivered in that apartment, two things. A, when was it delivered? How long was it in the apartment before you got the search warrant? And because then that would be an emergency search warrant if you're telling me it just got there. And if it was 2 or 3 days ago, what's the odds of it still being there when we're doing the search warrant? And secondly, when you're conducting a search warrant, if it's just for drugs, then how are you attaching the arrest warrant to the search warrant? So I'd have to look at this warrant and really be clear on what it describes, what amount of flexibility it gives the officers in the arrest and in the search. So there's a lot of things that I would love to look at. And these are questions that haven't been answered and haven't been asked, because I don't think the right people had the opportunity to either A, ask the questions or know what questions to ask. So,
see,
right.
this is why the grand jury process is outdated, and it's an opportunity for police officers to hide their dastardly deeds. Now, none of the police officers in question testified before the grand jury. You have to ask why not. What assurance did they have that they could stand by and not testify and they will be okay? If the prosecutor was truly going after them, then that benefit of the doubt thing goes out the window unless you testify. Understood they didn't have to. Now, this shows you the incestuous relationship between the district attorney's office and the police department. Now, when you also multiply the fact that the police department, as well as the mayor and the district attorney's office, Thomas Wine, they tried to get her former boyfriend to testify against her, saying that she was involved in his drug ring, whatever the former boyfriend was doing, get less time if he would agree to just state for the record that involvement in his drug dealing. Thank God that he had the integrity, you know, to say she was not involved, that, you know, he was involved in. He pointed that out. So that only means that this conspiracy was going on behind closed doors. So it only shows you they were trying to get the police officers off. After that didn't happen, they quickly settled. Why did they quickly settle that soon? So no presentation of the police officers, and the district attorney, the attorney general, the black man, tried to hide that, the guy Cameron, he tried to hide that by saying, since they returned fire to her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, they said they were justified in returning fire, therefore they're not, they won't be charged for that. That's crap. Because the fact of the matter is, if he was the target, why didn't you kill him? You killed BREONNA. And also the fact that even if he did shoot first, that should have been presented to the grand jury. You're supposed to be to find the facts. You're supposed to present everything to the grand jury, including the sergeant and the police officer, the detective and the sergeant played. Not just the wayward shooting that almost caused a couple, a grown man and woman, as well as a child in the neighboring apartment. So that is a prosecutorial fiat. That is an order that's just thrown out there that you have to accept. That's no good. He is not in a position to say who or who should not be charged with whatever. You're supposed to present all of the information to the grand jury. You just can't say they're free from even being, the grand jury reviews any and all action. The grand jury has the right to review everything that happened that night. You can't take 2 police officers off the hook just because, or claiming that they were shot at. You present all. He said that his investigation team had 200 years of experience. Well, why didn't somebody step forward and say, present all the evidence? He didn't even present the opportunity for them to look at manslaughter charges. He presented homicide charges. He did not present all the things that they could have looked at in making that decision. Therefore, it was well coordinating, starting earlier with Thomas Wine, who was the original DA, who was not going to charge officers in question. He was too busy covering it up, as well as the mayor, as well as the police department, covering all their tracks. And it's rather apparent, and the evidence that Kenneth Walker's attorney looked at said would have destroyed anybody. He was able to look at evidence because of his client. He said that would have gotten anybody locked up and arrested if they saw all that evidence that was being withheld from the grand jury, which he saw.
And Julian, that's why I've said it once on this program, and I said it 1,000 times, and I'm going to continue to say, this is why it was a bad strategy by Attorney Crump. I mean, him and the family was putting all of their hopes on the Attorney General's investigation, assuming that they were going to get a justifiable response. He stated today that on behalf of the family that they were outraged of the decision of the Attorney General and the grand jury, but he should have seen this coming. That's why, and he did see it coming. That's why I defined his actions as being treacherous. He works in conjunction with the local prosecutors. So it was his decision to encourage the family to settle. Now, the Attorney General stated that another jurisdiction is going to look into the warrant situation, which is very important. If it's the district attorney's office, Michael already told you that they're already have been complicit with the police officers' investigation. So they have an incestuous relationship. So we have no hope in the local prosecutor's office and even discussing the whole warrant situation. If they did, it would surprise me. I hope they do because they should. But if they don't, that issue is now moot because the family settled with the city. They can no longer bring it up. The district attorney can just say that they made a presentation to the local grand jury and the grand jury failed to indict. Since it's a secret proceeding, they don't have to talk about what was presented, what was stated, what was asked. That issue as it relates to the warrant, the issue as it relates to the cameras is never going to be discussed. Whereas I stated last week that if Crump was not a traitor to the cause of justice and only concerned about civil compensation, if he had withheld the agreement and just waited to see if there was going to be a criminal prosecution, he can raise those issues in a civil proceeding by deposing police officers and the authorities. That opportunity is going to be lost, and we're never going to know about the issue of warrant or cameras if the district attorney says they made a presentation to the local grand jury, they refuse to indict. So this is now the moot point. They only look at that one police officer, who fired wildly into BREONNA Taylor's apartment, almost killing her neighbors.
Right. Now, one of the things that
when you consider that
Mike said,
the FBI,
that when you talk about the grand jury proceedings, I agree. It is definitely outdated. I think that, why does it have to be a secret proceeding? They should allow the community and the public to be aware of the information that's being disseminated to the grand jury and ensure that when a jury is being charged and given information relative to these cases, that it's fair, above board, and complete. When we have these secret proceedings, we are not going to know what information was given to the grand jury. We're not going to know if the case was being presented in a fair and in a total manner. So we have to really question how our judicial system operates when it comes to these grand jury proceedings. And Mike, I know you wanted some more to say, but we're not going to be able to get to all our cases, excuse me, all of our issues or topics that we want to talk about. Mike, I just want to ask.
Okay, but what I want to mention is that at Cameron's press conference, he constantly forced out the FBI as part of an investigation. Now we know full well that the police department did not want, the district attorney's office did not want any assistance from the FBI. That's why the FBI was relegated only to the ballistics. So in terms of who did what was not a part of their investigation. They only gave a ballistic report with respect to angles and the amount of shots fired, and that was it. Not cause and effect, not the find of facts as to the conduct of those 3 police officers. Only a ballistic report. Yet the FBI. They did not want the FBI. The FBI volunteered to do the entire investigation. They didn't want it. Similar to Baltimore, that didn't want an investigation into Detective Souters being killed the day before, testified before the federal authorities in federal court. So they didn't want the FBI to investigate, yet he kept naming them. He knows full well that if the FBI did it and it was above board, that there would have been a lot of problems that would have had to have been answered. Among them, as I mentioned, why did it take 20 minutes for Breonna Taylor to receive medical attention? Over 20 minutes. So the FBI's name was used, but this was a whole town uniting with the state attorney general's office as a gatekeeper. And that shows you the hypocrisy of Benjamin Crump. He knows this. Now, some people said, brother, why are you throwing shade at Benjamin Crump? Now do you see? Do you see it now? I don't have a crystal ball, but I saw it. That's why I said last week that this was backwards, that he was doing it wrong. I don't need to have a law degree to understand when it's being destabilized in plain sight to exonerate police officers. I was with the attorney at war and discussed a lot of these things, Alton Maddox, this past weekend. I was with Attorney Maddox. I know that he lost his license for defending Sharpton and defending Tawana Brawley. Sharpton beating back those 67 counts. Tawana Brawley, police officers and district attorneys, state police officers would have all been arrested. Alton Maddox tried to put 6 prominent white people in jail for the rape and kidnap of Tawana Brawley. Consequently, they went after him instead of going after the purveyors of the crime itself. Ben Crump knows full well the reason he's on the police officers in these particular cases. All he to settle, get the call for peace and tranquility while he cuts a deal with that local mayor, district attorney, and even the governor's office situation. So to those who felt, Mike, come on, man, you throwing too much shade. Am I throwing too much shade now? Breonna Taylor's dead. No one is being charged with her murder. She didn't have a gun. She didn't have drugs. She didn't have money in the house. She was innocent as you are. To those who telling me I throw too much shade. Damn it, she's dead now. Her family's getting 8 million. Benjamin Crump is getting 4 million, and no one is being charged with her murder. What's happening with that last cop, that's treating her as collateral damage. Now, is that too much hate for telling the damn truth?
All right. Passionate, brother. Very passionate. Noel, last week we talked about a woman that had made racial slurs and threw bottles at a female black. There was 37-year-old female black that was jogging in Queens. And I know there's been an update to that case.
Yes, well, New York City Police Department, when the victim of this racial attack discovered that somebody had videotaped it, she came back to the authorities, and the New York City Police Department arrested Lorena de Laguna for 8 crimes, attempted assault, and felony aggravated harassment. So, you know, we'll follow and see the progression of this case. She should have been arrested, and we're glad that she was arrested, and we'll see how this case winds up. But we just want to update the story that we discussed last week, that there was an arrest in that particular case.
Right. You know, one of the things that we see that a lot of the issues surrounding the topics that we talk are attacks on African people. It's nonstop. It's a continuous problem that occurs within our community. We're looking for responses that are going to prevent, stop, prosecute, arrest, and hold people accountable for the attacks on our community. Just recently, 4 people were arrested in Iowa for the murder and burning of a black man. The black man was found in a ditch. The police department from that state made an arrest. They arrested 4 people, Stephen Vergal, Cody Johnson, Julia Cox, and Roy Lee Gardner. Now, all of them were arrested. Now, they're not charging them with a hate crime or a racial component to this particular case because the victim was known to one of the assailants, Stephen Vergal. Now, I have a problem with that. And without there being a thorough investigation to find out what the other 3 people's role were in this, why was this attack made on this man? I understand that they are going to be charged with murder, but there may be a racial component to this particular case. And without the police department conducting a thorough and a fair investigation, I don't think that determination should have been made at this juncture. Noel, your thoughts on this case?
Yeah, and I agree, Julian. Fortunately, the individuals that were arrested in this particular case are telling on each other. Unfortunately, and this is something that our community has to watch out. As Michael talked about earlier, the Attorney General in the BREONNA TAYLOR case being the gatekeeper, the local NAACP branch manager has stated that she didn't think this particular case was a hate crime case, but she never explained why. So, Julian, as you talk about the decision of the authorities not to prosecute this as a hate crime, fine, if you choose not to do it, but at least explain why. Because to just totally negate that there's a possibility that a hate crime was involved, when you look at the manner by which this individual was killed and his body was destroyed, you look at the racial component involved, you take under consideration the atmosphere throughout the nation that's going on. If you're not going to charge a hate crime, at least explain why you're not. So there will be some comfortability with the public to know that, okay, this is why it's not a hate crime. As you say to Julian, just because they knew each other doesn't mean that there wasn't a racial component to this particular act. And as I stated earlier, I was really disappointed with the comment made by the local NAACP branch. But we have a lot of gatekeepers in our community that have our complexion, but they don't share the same compassion for our people and the same commitment for our people that a lot of us have. So we'll follow that case and we'll see, how it further develops.
Right. Did you have anything on that, Mike?
No, brother. No, sir.
Okay.
Because,
so, Mike,
right now, I'm combustible. So maybe it's best that I just say that I concur with what Noel said.
Okay. All right. Well, let me ask you a question, brother. You mentioned Mike Ditka, who had made a statement about the NFL players when it comes to, we are in a racial time that is just so unbelievable right now. I mean, it is believable, but it's just so volatile right now. And Mike Ditka, who is famed in the NFL, made a statement about the players in the NFL who are supporting Black Lives Matter.
Well, Mike Ditka, you know, it just appears now this story is so irrelevant compared to what we just dealt with. But I'll just say he was one of those that was against Colin Kaepernick kneeling and told him he should leave the country. He followed up this past week by saying all the players who are kneeling that are disrespecting the flag and the national anthem, they should all leave the country. Now, you know, that's like really saying go back to Africa. And the fact of the matter is, he said, you're supposed to play football, you're privileged. Those players are not privileged, they're talented. He's privileged. He has white skin privilege, so he refuses to acknowledge that Black men are standing up saying that they are fed up with Black men, women, and being killed unjust. And this is why Stephen A. Smith, the gatekeeper of ESPN, has attacked Colin Kaepernick every time he gets the opportunity. And he even justified Blake Bortles, a bum quarterback, being signed by the Denver Broncos as opposed to giving Colin Kaepernick a tryout. They took a loser, a perennial loser, and signed him. And Stephen A. Smith justified it, saying, well, look how long Colin Kaepernick hasn't played in the NFL, as if this loser that can't even get on the field is better prepared to play football than Colin Kaepernick, a man who went to the Super Bowl and the man that was one play away of going back-to-back 2 years in a row to the Super Bowl. That only shows you that white supremacy reigns supreme, and Mike Ditka can't understand that Black athletes are standing up, and instead of just saying to them, shut up and dribble and just play ball, he's a part of that era of white supremacists that doesn't understand that there's a new Black man, woman on the scene that's willing to challenge them on whatever level they have to for freedom, justice, and equality.
Well, Noel, I love Michael, but I'm gonna have to disagree with him. When he said, that this is irrelevant, I have to disagree, because I think that the attack on our people is so prevalent. I think there's a nexus between the way some of these people like a Mike Ditka and all of these, the woman who attacked that sister that was jogging. I think there's a nexus. I think that one leads to the other. I think that when we look at some of these things that appear to be small, and in some minds, and I know not in your Michael, not in your mind, Michael, but in some minds that are insignificant, these things permeate, they grow, and they fester into some of these vicious attacks that exist on our people. The in-depth hatred that exists in the minds and the bodies of some of these people, and the attacks that they do in our community, if they start out as a pebble, they turn out into boulders. So we have to look at the nexus and the connection of all these attacks, whether it's a verbal attack on our sports or whether it's an attack on our sister jogging down the street. When these things happen, I think that allows them to be comfortable enough to do some of the heinous crimes that they exist. And that's not taken away from the magnitude of the murders that exist in our community, but we have to keep an eye on the totality of the racism and the white supremacy that exists and the attacks on our community. But I know that you're not minimizing.
Well,
go ahead.
Right. Well, that's why I said it seems irrelevant now, because for a Black woman, 26 years old, starting her career as a medical technician, who knows if she's going to be a doctor tomorrow? She was starting out a blossoming career with a profession that is well respected. For her to be killed savagely by 3 police officers, and then that's followed up by air cover from a mayor, a district attorney's office, and then the attorney general's office, I'm saying that, and that shows you the system tied in with law enforcement, and then the politics of a mayor all providing air cover to cover up this black woman that's killed. I'm just saying, in a real sense, it seems insignificant. I know that every level of white supremacy, every tentacle and tenet, the width and breadth of white supremacy must be challenged on any and all levels. I am clear on that. But right now, I told you I am consumed. I am combustible. To look at a young black woman, 26 years old, savagely killed, then killed second time by the so-called legal system. I'm upset about that. So upset that it seems like what Ditka and what Stephen A. Smith does is mild-mannered in comparison, but I know the difference in a devil and a gatekeeper, and certainly Mike Ditka is a part of this devil system, and certainly the gatekeepers like Attorney General Cameron, as well as ESPN sports analyst Stephen A. Smith, they're all gatekeepers, and their day is coming. As I've ended many shows with, the axe gets what the tree remembers. There's some of us that remember. You can see the eyes in the way we walk, the way we approach things, where you can look at Negroes all smiling and grinning, and they so glad to be around and get photo ops, and so glad they got some money. They forgot. But I'm telling you, this is one that hasn't forgotten. It's on my mind, it's in me 24 hours a day. I remember.
Now, going back, thanks for that, Mike, also. Going back to what Mike Ditka stated, you know, he has an old world view, old world of thinking, which is racist, founded in white supremacy. I mean, it's one thing to disagree with Colin Kaepernick's decision to protest during the national anthem. Fine. I have no problem with people who may have a disagreement with Colin Kaepernick or my perception of his protest. But to suggest that, you know, if individuals who agree with Colin Kaepernick, including him, should leave the country, you know, I mean, this country has a freedom of speech, a right to protest. And although you may disagree with somebody's speech, you may disagree with somebody's protest, you know, for somebody to say that individuals such as Colin Kaepernick should leave the country if he insists on protesting the way he does is ridiculous. But it's a reflection of their point of view as it relates to African Americans, and that includes, you know, a lot of your favorites, the Supreme Court justice who just made a transition, Ginsburg, who just passed. You know, she called Colin Kaepernick's decision to protest dumb, disrespectful, and I took offense when she made that statement in 2016. Those kind of adjectives. And you always look at the description that they have when they just have a disagreement with somebody of African-American descent. They use these disrespectful terms of dumb. And I took issue with her, and I thought it was inappropriate. And I think Ditka's comments is inappropriate as well.
All right, we're out of time, so we're going to go to our closing comments. Unfortunately, we have some other topics we want to talk about. Hopefully, we'll get to them next week. Noel.
I just want to quickly say that I think in all instances where you have plainclothes police officers doing these search warrants, these no-knock warrants, at least 1, 2, or 3 of them should have body cameras on. Lindy Lou, I love you. Kitty Cat, I love you. Little Mo.
Big Mike.
To the attorney at war, Alton Maddox, brother, nothing but love and respect for what you've accomplished. Looking forward to you getting better and better. Consequently, we need you, brother. Black man, black woman, protect the black child. Accept your own and be yourself.
V, I know there's no more time. Harper family, I love you. See you next week. Community Cop family. V, great job. D, great job. Sheila.
Nat Woods.
Nat Woods, everybody. See you later. Peace. Goodbye.